Hi, I am Milan Gandhi. We have developed a revenue management analysis tool. This is the executable and which we need to open. Click on it. It will take a couple of seconds to activate. The tool is activated. It consists of two applications, single leg and network revenue management. The single leg with two fare classes and uncertain demand model has three classes of customers: low fare, high fare, and third class that prefers to pay the low fare but is willing to pay the high fare. The second is network revenue management, is a hub and spoke model which partitions seats among the passengers. There is also a shadow price calculations that indicates whether to accept or reject the customer's bid price offers. Let's start with the single leg revenue management application, which includes the scenarios of buyer probability and no-shows also. Let's start. Let's assume there is a daily non-stop flight from JFK to Salt Lake in USA, domestic flight, and which is scheduled after 15 days, and the airline wants to set up the booking limit for the 3 days, that is 1st of April, 2nd of April and 3rd of April. So let's enter the origin, that is JFK. The destination is Salt Lake, and from date is the airline wants it from 1st April 2020 to 3rd April 2020. Here you can enter from date and to date you can enter for 1 week also, for 1 month, for 1 year also, and for each day a report will be generated, which will see the way it is done. So let's submit. Let's assume the aircraft which is flying is A320, having the capacity of 146 passengers. The high fare prices, which are non-refundable, full fare prices, that is that is refundable. Let's say it's $174, one-way ticket it is, and the low fare price, which are non-refundable, which are booked in advance, that is $114. Now the airline can have the mean demand and the standard deviation of both the low fare and high fare they can infer it from the previous year's sales data and get the mean low fare demand, low fare standard deviation, mean high fare demand, and high fare standard deviation. So let's assume the mean low fare demand is 148. This is standard deviation is 40. For high fare high fare demand is 48, and the high fare standard deviation is 20. Here there are, in this application there is another feature which would help to get the low fare to demand and the high fare demand if the airline does not have the historical data and they just have got the demand, total demand for that particular day, which we'll see on the 3rd of April. The third iteration, we'll look into that. at the moment we have got this particular data, we are entering, and let's submit. So when we submit, low fare demand and high fare demand calculations will be done. Let's submit. So the low fare demand is 132 and the high fare demand is 40. Low fare demand is on the higher side with a capacity of 146, looking at the capacity of 146, and a high fare demand is 40. Let's move to the next screen. Now the protection level, and we can enter any whatever the protection level you need for the full fare tickets. That's the high fare tickets. The airline wants to protect this particular number of seats for this particular flight. Let's say the demand is 40, but the airline wants to have the protection level for high fare full fare tickets is 50. And you can add a capacity, because we've got a low fare demand which is on the higher side. We'll add, this becomes the virtual capacity, and this is also connected with the overbooking. So let's say 146 is the total capacity of the aircraft, but we are adding another 8 seats to make it 154. And show up probability, that is for the high fare passengers, show up probability is 92%, say. So 0.92 we enter. And bumped up fee, the passengers who will not be accommodated on this flight will be flown on some other flight. So the fee, bumped up fee is, say, $180. Based on this, when we submit click the submit button, revenue from all the sales will be generated, the expected revenue, and buyer probability. The buyer probability is for the low fare passengers who did not get the seat for the low fares, and they are willing to pay for the high fare. The probability of each passenger who have been shut out, who did not get the ticket, would be this particular probability. So let's submit. So revenue from all the sales, that is low fare and high fare, is 19,140, and buyer probability for each low fare customers who did not get the ticket for low fare, who are willing to buy the high fare tickets, is for each customer there's a 30% of chances, that is 0.3. So let's click on next, and here we generate the report. Here the report would be having all the calculations: the total capacity, booking limit, low fare tickets sold based on the that is the booking limit, and the low fare customer shutout who did not get the ticket for the low fare. The number of passengers, there are 132 passengers there, so the shutout numbers will be there. Low fare customers buying up, the probability of each customer buying up would be 0.3, that is 30% will come. Total high fare demand would be, the high fare demand is 40, and the number of passengers who are willing to buy the high fare tickets will be added here. High fare tickets sold would be the protection level what we have set, that is 50. High fare show up passengers would be the numbers of passengers, 92% as we have mentioned. So whatever the high fare tickets sold, based on that the number of passengers would be 92% of the passengers will show up, and the number of passengers who would not be showing up. And then high fare passengers flying on this particular flight, the actual number of passengers including the high fare show up passengers and the low fare tickets sold will come. The pumped up passengers who could not be accommodated on this particular flight, the numbers will come. The total seats occupied, that should be the original total capacity, and total empty seats. So when we generate report, click on generate report, we'll get this calculations, and the report is created successfully. and these are the calculations. You can see the report is generated from the folder from where we have opened the executable, that is this one. So 1/4/2020, and we'll look into it after completing the whole scenario. So the total capacity was 154, that is adding the virtual capacity of 8 seats we added, 146 plus 8 is 154. The booking limit was set up at 104 and the low fare tickets were sold at 104. Low fare customer shut out of 132 customers. The demand was 132, 28 were shut out and 104 were the booking limit and the tickets sold. So this becomes 132. Low fare customers buying up, there are chances of 30% of them, chances the number is 12. Total high fare demand is 40 was the original demand, plus this 12 becomes 52. High fare tickets sold, that is at the protection level set by the airline, is 50. High fare show up passengers is 46, that is 92% of the 50 tickets sold. High fare no show passengers is 4, which is this particular total of 50. 46 plus 4 is 50, so these 4 numbers were no show. High fare passengers flying on this particular flight is 42. 42 plus 104, that is tickets sold for low fare, that becomes 146. That is the actual capacity of the aircraft. Actual number of passengers were actually 46, that is high fare show up passengers plus low fare tickets sold. So 104 plus 46 is 150. Bumped up passengers were 4 because they could not be accommodated, because 42 only can fly the high fare tickets. 104 were already been sold. So 104 plus 104 plus 42 is 146. So bumped up passengers were the total seats occupied on this aircraft is 146, that's the original capacity. Total empty seats is 0. Now this is for the 1st of April. Let's move, click on the next. So we'll go on to the next, and that comes this first screen where we enter the data, and this is for the 2nd of April. The capacity remains the same. The high fare tickets rates remain, low fare tickets rate remain the same. We'll change the mean low fare demand. Let's say the mean low fare demand here is 92 and the low fare standard deviation is 30. Here we can see we'll put is 80 is the mean high fare demand, and 25 is the standard deviation for the high fare. And then we submit we'll click on the submit button. The low fare demand and high fare demand will change. Let's click. So the low fare demand is 80, high fare demand is 70, the total capacity is 146. Here the low fare demand is on the lower side. So basically looking at it, we do not go for the virtual capacity. Let's click on the next button. Let's keep the protection level at 15. We would want, the airline would want to sell 50 tickets for the high fare, and capacity need not be added. There won't be much of there is no much demand, and let us say the show up probability for the high fare tickets, that the full fare tickets is 100, that is 1.0, that becomes the 100%, and the bumped up fees will not be there because there won't be any bumped up passengers, so we keep it 0. And based on this we will go for the calculations, and we just hit the submit button. Buyer probability won't be there, should not be there, because there is no much demand for the low fare. So when we submit it, here we get the buyer probability becomes 0 because the low fare demand is less, and revenue from all the sales is 19,644. Let's move on to the next screen, and here we'll generate the report, and we'll see all the calculations done. So let's generate the report. Okay, the report is generated successfully here, which is the 2nd of April 2020. And let's go back to the screen and see the calculations. Total capacity is 146. There is no virtual capacity added, no overbooking. So booking limit has been set to 96. Low fare tickets is sold is 96, and the total high fare demand was 70. High fare tickets sold was 50 because the protection level high fare show up passengers is 50. Is 100% of the high fare tickets sold. There's no question about no show passengers of high fare. High fare passengers flying will be 50 because there's no total show up passengers 50. Actual numbers of passengers flying is 146. Bumped up passengers, there was no bumped up passengers. Total seats occupied is 146. That's the original capacity. Total empty seats is 0, and the report was generated. Let's click on the next button. That will go to the 3rd of April. Here I mentioned that this remains the same, the total capacity, high fare, and this low fare. Here I mentioned the airline does not have the historical data. They just know the demand for that particular day would be this much, whatever the figure we enter. Let's assume that whatever figure we entered, the total demand was there for low fare and high fare on 1st of April. We will put the same one. So 132 was the demand for the 1st of April for the low fare, and here in standard deviation we will put 0, and the high fare was 40 in the 1st of April. So we're just putting the demand, total demand straight away, and then we'll submit it. Here you can see on 1st of April we had got this particular 132. We've got the same numbers. Here we do not have this particular data of standard deviation. We just knew about the total demand as such for high fare and low fare. So this is what it is. Let's click next and keep the same, we'll add the capacity again. As the low fare demand is more, we'll add the capacity to 8, which was done on 1st of April, and then 0.92 was the show up probability of the high fare passengers, and the bumped up fee per passenger was 180. Now let's submit. You see 19,140, that was also on 1st of April. The 30% buyer probability of the low fare passengers who did not get the tickets would want to buy the high fare tickets. So let's keep next and generate report, and the same sort of a report. The only difference would be there was no standard deviation and mean demand for this low fare and high fare tickets. The rest, as we entered the same amount of demand and standard demand for the 1st of April, which was for low fare and high fare, we got these figures which are identical. So the report has been generated here. So this is 1st of April, 2nd of April, and this is the 3rd of April right now what we enter. So 3 reports have been generated. Now as we have we wanted to set up booking limit for 3 days only, and we entered in the field from date and to date, that was 1st of April to 3rd of April. Now when we click next, it will directly go to the home screen. So the iteration is done. That is what exactly the airline wanted for 3 days, and we got it. Now we'll go to the report part of it, and you'll see the report, which is 1st of April, the report which was generated. this was the data input for the 1st of April and JFK. Yeah, this is the number of figures. This was the demand, low fare demand and mean and standard deviation, and high fare mean and standard deviation of the high fare, which was entered. Then we entered the protection level at the capacity to 8, and 92% was the show-up probability for the high fares, and $180 was the bumped up fee. The calculations which were there, which we saw, was this was 154, 146 plus 8 is 154, the virtual capacity, and then the low fare demand was 132 calculated when high fare demand was 40. Booking limit was 104. Low fare customer shutout were 28. So 104 plus 28 is 132, and 30% of the low fare of the shutout passengers, this is, would buy the tickets for the high fare. That is, number is 12. 12 number of customers bought the ticket for high fare low, and higher total high fare demand is 52, which was 40. High fare demand was 40 plus 12, which is going to buy this ticket. Low fare customers is going to buy the high fare ticket, so it becomes 52. High fare passengers show up is 46, and high fare no show was 4. That is 4 passengers did not show up. That is a 92% less for that. High fare passengers flying on this flight is 42 plus 104 that's the number of tickets sold, that is 146, and the total number of actual passengers were 150. Show-up passengers of 46 plus 104 booking limit, which were the number of tickets sold also. So this becomes 46 plus 104 is 150, and then bumped up passengers were 4 who could not be accommodated. So 46 were the high fare passengers show up, but the 4 did not get the could not be accommodated because 104 tickets were sold for, already been sold, and 50 tickets which were sold from that, and the no show were there, and after that could not be accommodated because the capacity was 146. This is the total emphasis is 0. Total number of low fare tickets sold was 104, and high fare tickets sold 50. That was the protection level we said. So total revenues from this particular sales is this much, it includes the bumped up fees also. The $180 for 4 passengers needs to be deducted. So this becomes that calculation, and this is the report generated time, and that's it. So this is the 1st of April. We'll close that, and we'll go to the next one, is the 2nd of April. So this was the data input for the 2nd of April, where we changed the mean low fare 92 and standard deviation 30, 80 for high fare, and 25 standard deviation for low or high fare. And the protection level was the capacity we did not enter because of the low fare. The demand was low, so there was no virtual capacity, and then 100% was the show up probability. Bumped up fee was not entered, and this was the calculations done for this. So here you can see the 146 was the total capacity, 80 was the low fare demand, high fare demand 70, booking limit was set up for 96. Low fare customer shut out, no question about it already. The low fare demand was low, so there is no question of that, and probability of buying up is 0%. Low fare customers buying is 0, number of passengers is 0. Total high fare demand was 70, but we have set the booking limit for 50, and so the tickets were sold was 50, and no show, there's no question of this particular numbers, no show and high fare passengers flying, these are the numbers. The number of tickets sold would be the high fare passengers, show of passengers. So actual passengers flying is 146, that is 96 plus 50, so that would be the number. And the total empty seats 0, total occupied 0, bumped up passengers 0. Low fare tickets sold were 96, that was the booking limit. The booking limit. And the high fare ticket, which was a protection level, this is calculated, revenues 90,000 and the report generated time. So this is of the 2nd of April. Now we'll look at the 3rd of April, the report being generated. So this is what we entered. We assumed that there is no historical data for the airline, and they just knew the demand of this particular day would be something 132 and 40 for the high fare passengers, and the rest in the standard deviation we have entered 0, and that is the protection level we kept it as 50, and the virtual capacity the same like in the 1st of April we put the same inputs and the same results coming out for the calculations. In the end we get the same figure of 19,140, 104 and 50 sold for the low fare and high fare, and the bumped up fees will be also deducted. The 4 number of passengers who did not get that, who could not be accommodated on this flight would be accommodated on some other flight, so that is also calculated. So this is the single leg revenue management application. Now let's move to the second application, that is network revenue management. Let's click here. Let's start. This is the network revenue management application, and which is based on the hub and spoke model. Let's assume there is an airline which flies 3 flights over to 3 cities from the hub. Let's assume that particular hub is Houston. The capacity of the aircraft is 240, and we'll add the hub. So hub has been added, that is Houston. The spoke cities are Chicago, which of the 3 aircraft, so all the 3 aircraft have got the same capacity 240, and then we add another spoke city, Miami, which has got the capacity of 240, which is flying the aircraft is having the capacity, and we'll have Phoenix, which is having the capacity of the aircraft which flies from all these places are having 240 is the capacity. So here you can see the Houston is the hub, Chicago, Miami and Phoenix are the spoke cities. Now enter the prices for the tickets for all this, and we'll enter in dollars, this all in dollars, and we'll enter, these are the ticket prices for one way for all the routes, and Miami, Houston 108, 292, and here we enter is 238, here we enter is 110, 192, and here we'll enter is 230. This is the ticket prices for all these routes, and here is the demand, number of passenger demands. Here it's all the demand is more than the capacity of the aircraft. So let's put 123, and this is 110. No, this would be 80, 110, 130, 98, 88, 80, and here we put 72, 72, and 105, 68, and 115, 90, 66. So these are the basically the demand for the routes. There are three there are three inbound routes and three outbound direct routes, and the three inbound routes would be Chicago, Miami, and Phoenix. That is from Chicago to Houston, Chicago to Miami, and Chicago to Phoenix. That becomes the inbound direct routes, and the outbound direct routes would be from Houston to Chicago, Houston to Miami, and Houston to Phoenix. So this 6 routes becomes the bank, and each bank can serve at least 12 routes. Another 6 additional routes would be Chicago, Miami, Chicago, Phoenix, Miami, Chicago, and Miami, Phoenix, and then Phoenix, Chicago, and Phoenix, Miami. So in all 12 routes would be flown by this particular, and this 6 additional routes would consist of 2 flights each. So in all 12 routes are flown for this particular so one bank would be having this number of routes for the passengers to fly. So when we submit this data, these are the fares being calculated. The allocations will be happening based on the ticket prices which are entered out here, and we'll look at it. The Houston has got the minimum number of that's the lowest ticket prices, and based on the all the fare structures and the demand, the allocations will be done. So when we submit it and move to the next screen, we will generate the data and we'll get the allocations based on this data. Number of seats to be allocated for the each flight, for each route. So generate data. Yeah. So this was the data was generated. You can see the allocations from Houston to any of the spoke cities. It won't change because that Houston is a hub, and from Chicago to Houston you can see Chicago to Houston the allocations have changed. Chicago to Miami and Chicago to Phoenix is not changed. Chicago to Houston it is allocated at 54. Let's see what was the original figure for Chicago to Houston. Let's push back, and Chicago to Houston was 130. So the allocations done were at Chicago to Houston will become 54 only, because it's an overcapacity. Basically the demand is more than the capacity needs to be allocated. So the number of tickets sold for the Chicago and Houston has come to, the demand was 130, but it's come to been allocated only 54 tickets has been sold. So the same way we'll look at the other figures. The same as I said, the Houston tickets structures were the lowest. Miami to Houston is 67. Let's go back and check that. Miami to Houston was 72 tickets. The demand was 72. The tickets were sold, allocated was 67. And the rest of the figures were the same. And then we'll see is Phoenix to Houston, which is 84. Let's go back. Phoenix to Houston was 115 was the demand, but only 84 has been allocated to them. So, and the rest of the figures are the same because the ticket prices are higher than this one. So this is the allocation, and when we generate, and this is the total revenue generated for the 3 banks, for each bank for this particular hub and spoke model. So 197,617. So if let's generate create a report first. Let's click on create report. Report must have been created here. That is NRM XLS. So we'll open this report. So this was the data input by us. Initially on the first screen, the prices of the tickets and the demands were entered. This is a worksheet. This is original allocation what we right now entered. So Houston and Chicago, this becomes the same as I mentioned, because Houston is the hub, and here the tickets, here the Chicago to Houston numbers were changed, and then Miami to Houston was changed, and then Phoenix to Houston were changed. Total revenue for this was 197,617. Let's assume that this particular allocations and the same fare structure and same demand is there over a year, and say for each for a weekdays for the whole year. So it would be around about 250 days in a year, and there are 3 banks. So 250 into 3 into this particular figure of 197,617 would come to approximately $1.48 million. So this hub, Houston hub, is generating revenue of $1.48 million if it is continued for the whole year. So this is one part of this application. Let's go to the another part. Is let's assume there is a offer from a particular airline stating that they want to fly from Miami to Chicago, and their offer bid price is $285 per seat, and they want to book for 10 seats. Let's place this order, and here you can see the shadow price breakdown. Miami to Houston is 108, and Houston to Chicago is 197. Let's go back and check it out. Miami to Houston and Houston to Miami to Houston is 108, and Houston to Chicago is 197. So this is the shadow price is 305, the bid price is 285. The suggestive answer is no. Now let's assume there is another airline who's offering $306 per seat for they want to book 10 seats, and let's place the order. And 306 seats bid price, and this is the same calculation, Miami to Houston and Houston to Chicago, and the suggestive answer is yes. Now let's accept this offer and see the changes here in the allocation. So this is what is the changes: 197 757, so $140 has been added for this particular bank, and we'll see the allocations. So this was there. Miami to Chicago was the bid for 10 number of seats were there, and originally the Miami to Chicago was having 105 as the demand allocated passengers. We'll go back and check it out. 105. Miami to Chicago was 105. So it's been segregated for with this particular bid price 95, and for a bid price the 10 seats are reserved. The revenue gets increased by $140 here, so annually it would have an impact. And now that we have accepted the offer, we'll generate a report. Let's click on the generate report and go back to the same folder. Here it would be overwritten on the previous report what we had seen. That was the original allocation. Sorry, and just to be closed, it was open. It has to be read as this particular report was open. It needs to be generated again. Let's generate. And yeah, so this report was there. This was the original inputs. Then the second one what we saw is this particular original allocations, 197 617, the allocations what we saw, and this is what the bid allocation is. This is where the bid Miami bidding to Chicago, that was 10 number of seats. Here it was 105, so it has become 95 here and 10 here. And then now our revenue is changed to 197 757, that is an increase to $140. And this is the way the bid allocation is done, and the report is being generated, is being segregated. As you see on the original allocation, it was 105. Miami Chicago was 105, and Miami Chicago, there will be two entries. Miami Chicago here is 95. Miami, this is the bid, and this has become 10 allocated out. And this is the way report is generated. And let's go back here, and this is what this network revenue management application, and the shadow price is correct way of calculating the bid price because the constraints are less than the combinations of flight lags or itineraries. So this is what this application, two applications for revenue management analysis tool is there. And thanks for watching it.